Thank you for joining us today. I'm Bruce Goldstein with Farm Worker Justice in Washington, D.C. Welcome to the Facebook program series, The State of Farm Workers in America in the COVID-19 Era. Farm workers have been designated essential workers to ensure our nation's food security during the COVID pandemic. Yet their working and living conditions create grave risks to their health and economic status. These programs raise awareness about the serious challenges the pandemic imposes on farm workers and their family members each and every day. The series also identifies impactful work and innovative solutions being carried out by Farm Worker Justice and other organizations that represent and serve farm workers. For those who are tuning in for the first time, this is our 12th program in this series. And each video is posted every day shortly after the interview is conducted. So you can see it on our Facebook page at Farm Worker Justice. You can also see it on the Farm Worker Justice YouTube channel. We have a wealth of information on our farmworkerjustice.org website. I encourage you to visit there to see the wealth of information about immigration, labor rights, occupational safety and health, and also our dedicated COVID-19 page. So let me now turn to our guest, Reyna Lopez. Reyna, welcome. Thank you.
Buenos dias. How is everybody doing today?
You know, as well as we can under the circumstances. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So Reyna Lopez is the Executive Director of PCUN, Pineros y Campesinos Unidos del Noroeste, Tree Planters and Farm Workers United. It's Oregon's farm worker union. And Farm Worker Justice and PCUN go way back. We've been working together for many, many years. So we know each other well, but it's a special pleasure to have Reyna join us today. So Reyna, please tell our viewers about PCUN and its mission.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for having me. I've been following the videos and they've been awesome, awesome. Thank you for making sure that the voice of the community is heard. And a little bit about PCUN. Our mission is really to empower farm workers and really even our families, our working families that are here in Oregon, mainly through building community. We increase representation of Latinx community in elections and also systems change at the state and national level. And PCUN, if you've ever been to Oregon, we're based in the heart of our Latinx community here in Oregon in one of the most vibrant agricultural areas in the state in Marion County. And we're Oregon's Farm Worker Union is how most people know us, and we fight for low-wage workers and Latinx families. So PCUN really started with this vision of workers being able to take action against exploitation and all the effects that come with that. And we've really built this legacy of strengthening workers' rights, of creating safer workplaces, advocating for fair wages, and pushing for enough economic security for us to be able to just care for our families. And our values really focus around equity, dignity, and respect for all workers, and of course the Si Se Puede spirit that was brought to us by Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez. And PCUN was actually founded by 80 farm workers in 1985, and today that legacy continues. A lot of the people that work at PCUN today and in our membership base have a deep family history with it, including myself, and it's a really meaningful thing to have that.
Yeah, we'll get into your personal background because it is interesting. But let me get you to say now a little bit more about PCUN's recent activities before the pandemic. I, in Farm Worker Justice, know PCUN from its mobilization and organizing of farm workers. It created this fascinating training institute, Capaces. It has developed farm worker housing that is run by the farm workers. It developed a radio station that may have now turned into a little network, as I understand it.
Yeah.
It's always engaged with us and a lot of federal advocacy on immigration policy and immigrants' rights and labor rights, as well as a lot of state-based advocacy around a range of issues that fit into the empowerment goals that you have. So it's not just about farm worker rights on the job, but about voting rights, and about access to education. So why don't you tell us what PCUN's been doing, until the pandemic hit, which we'll get into later.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic's obviously changed a lot of things, but I think that probably a testament to how important it is to have a strong foundation is that the lens and the values and the core of the work hasn't changed. There's still a tremendous need to ensure that we do everything in our power to end exploitation of workers, and especially as we're deemed essential, but yet still don't have some of the most basic things that we need to be able to be safe during this time, to be able to be secured during this time. PCUN has become a lot of things to a lot of people, I think, in Oregon, and also I think that on the national level. In terms of PCUN, thinking about where we started in '85, when farm workers had a dream of starting their own union, despite not having that actual right given to us on the national level, right, through the exclusion of the National Labor Relations Act. We still did it, right? We still used that Si Se Puede spirit to create a dynamic organization that had to be flexible, had to be what you needed us to be in that moment, had to build power, had to get creative, and had to do a lot of different things for intergenerational with an intergenerational lens and a intercultural lens. I think that also one theme to highlight is this theme of interconnectedness, that there's this need to be in this work and have a lens of intersectionality, and I think we've really tried to meet that moment whenever it appears. In terms of just the core programs of PCUN, we do worker organizing still. That's still something that's really essential in our outreach. We have our farm worker outreach organizers who go out into the fields, and right now we're not visiting the fields, but still on the phones, just connecting people with resources around their rights, starting to plant seeds around what PCUN does and what it means to be going from this mentality of maybe needing a service in that moment, but to also using that as an opportunity to become an organizer, and really following the vision that every worker can be an organizer. And we have a few things that happen through the worker organizing. The traditional boycotts, like those iconic marches that you've seen, and the leafletting, of course. We always love our old school.
The NORPAC boycott.
We love our tactics from the past, but also doing some new things. And we have a program called Healthy Workplaces, and our membership program for PCUN, where it also involves a lot of looking within ourselves and starting to do more healing. We've been integrating indigenous healing practices from Mexico, and these healing circles that we bring workers together to talk about the traumas that are happening out in the fields and how they're affecting us showing up as organizers in our communities today. Also organizing our worker summits throughout the year, where the members come together and come up with the issues that are going to make part of our political agenda. And of course our membership convention at the end of the year, where people actually take an official vote on what our political agenda is for the upcoming year. Our electoral organizing work has been something that has been getting a lot of attention, a lot of traction. Acción Política PCUNista is a fully bilingual, bicultural, unapologetically political program that talks about BIPOC, Black and Indigenous people of color candidates, and really focuses on building power for a lot of this kind of up and coming, if not in some places already dominating community, which is a lot of the children of the farm workers that have become naturalized, people that we organize to really increase our political power, our political voice through the ballot with a fully bilingual, bicultural voting program that specifically talks to Latinx voters in Oregon and has made a big difference in elections. We've been able to get our first Latina immigrant, indigenous Latina representing here in our home city in Woodburn, House District 22, which is the first minority majority House district in Oregon. Also, policy and systems change is a big focus of our work because we're seeing that a lot of the times face-to-face negotiation with an employer wasn't really working for us. So we started changing laws, and a lot of the big changes that we were able to make systematically for workers here in Oregon really came through just going and really leveraging our power in terms of our community and saying, hey, we want these changes and we need to see them everywhere across the state. You've heard a little bit about Radio Poder, formerly known as Radio Movimiento. Mass communications is an essential piece of making sure that people are informed in our community, making sure that we have an avenue that is very focused on organizing, educating, and empowering community. And so our Radio Poder is a community radio station that is basically now reaching the entire Mid-Willamette Valley. We went from being a low-powered radio station to a high-powered radio station and transitioned this year. It was a big move for us, and have awesome programs that really are driven by community members. And some of the programs that I'm most proud of are especially the ones where the PCUN members are the most invested. We have Laura Oaxaqueña, which is a program that's in Mixteco, which is one of the top spoken indigenous languages in the farm worker community here in Oregon. Laura Purépecha, and also we have La Tierra Mestiza. It's a really awesome radio station. In addition to some of our newer topics, which we have now a radio show that's about justicia ambiental, environmental justice, which has been a huge part of the intersections and the lenses that we've been bringing to the work, as well as our network of sister organizations, which is really where this model expanded, right? It's where this decentralized leadership model that really tries to meet immigrant families where they're at, where are their needs at. And the organizations that make up the sister network came out of PCUN at some point, or a need from a PCUN member at some point, and now we call ourselves the Alianza Poder. And it's made up of PCUN, which really has focused in on labor and politics, on Mujeres Luchadoras Progresistas, a women's economic empowerment group, CAUSA, Oregon's Immigrant Rights Organization, Salem Kaiser Coalition for Equality, which has really focused in on parent advocacy and really supporting parents in their own leadership to be able to advocate for their children in education settings. Mano a Mano Family Services, a direct service organization that has everything from food pantries to navigation supports, citizenship classes, things like that. Radio Poder, Farmworker Housing Development Corporation, which is our farm worker housing units in different parts of the state, and has been not just a place for affordable housing, but it's also been a place for different service connections for the families, and has been an amazing pipeline of leadership to the Movimiento, to all the sister organizations. Capaz's Leadership Institute, which is our leadership training hub, and it has several different programs, which include a program for youth called Turno, a program called People's Representatives, to start getting our gente basically to have capacity to run for office, to become those leaders, to become those champions for our issues. And also, they are the folks that kind of organize all of us. They also organize the Alianza Poder and provide organizational development support. We've been launching a management school as well. And then Centro de Servicios para Campesinos, which, as you know, is actually housed at PCUN. It's the brick and mortar of PCUN. It's where many families have come through to not just become members of PCUN, but also to get different supports, everything from immigration services, a very limited scope of immigration services, to referrals, something as simple as reading you your utility bill, and of course, Latinos Unidos Siempre, which is our youth organization, youth organizing that has amazing radical politics that has been doing a lot of the work around the school to prison pipeline. So it's a lot, but I mean, I think that that's kind of the best way I can describe the depth and the breadth of this organizing model.
Thanks, and I want to get to some other things, but I will mention that we've worked with PCUN for many years on federal policy advocacy around immigration and around the worker protections on pesticides at the EPA, and those have been very creative, and it's just been great to be able to work with an organization that's so connected to the farm workers on the ground and can go to their members of Congress in Oregon when the members are back home in their districts, but then also bring farm workers to Washington, D.C. to meet with members of Congress and EPA officials and explain why immigration reform is needed, what kind of immigration reform, why pesticide safety protections need to be strengthened, and how. But let me turn to you. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about your background and how you came to be part of PCUN and now the leader of PCUN?
Yeah, I like to say that PCUN's in my DNA, but that, I didn't choose the movement chose me. I mean, I'm a daughter of immigrants, like many of us that do this work are, and they came to Oregon following the migration of the farm work north. My parents both came from Mexico. My dad is from Zamora, Michoacan. My family in Zamora is Purépechas, Tarascos, and, still very connected to farming and generations of farmers basically back in Mexico. And my mom is from Hermosillo, Sonora, but also, kind of the family kind of kept moving north from Nayarit and ended up settling in Hermosillo. And my parents basically, they moved out to California, to Santa Ana. That's where they settled for a little while to work in the strawberry fields with no papers back then. And then in 1986, my dad moved us to Salem, Oregon. I was a baby still back then. And he came up here to become a Pinero. And him and a bunch of my uncles like rallied and came up to Salem and all worked in the Christmas tree industry. And that basically is the same year that he was able to come to PCUN to get himself some help filling out his legalization paperwork for him and my mom. And that is also the same time that he also became a member of PCUN. So it's really interesting to look into the files and see my dad right there. And I'm just like, whoa, so many things that I feel like I kind of knew, but I didn't know. And then just growing up in Salem, where in the mid 90s, and there was a lot of my family that also moved up from Michoacan, and especially my dad's side. So it was a pretty vibrant childhood. My whole street that I grew up in, everybody was related to me. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, we worked in the blueberry fields, the marionberries, cherries. I even picked worms when I was young, and that was a real that was a real experience when you're a kid and you're just and picking worms was just like whoa. But also saw a lot of racism and injustice in my community, which was a really big motivator for me to want to serve. And I attended Willamette University in Salem. I got a pretty awesome scholarship to be able to go there, or else I wouldn't have been able to afford it. But I remember that one of my first classes there was a work class and labor colloquium. And I fell in love with the labor movement when I first actually got to learn about it. I felt like I never got really a lot from that in my high schools or in times before that. But shortly after that, I kind of had my gateway into politics, and I started working for a senator back in 2007, and was pretty much one thing I noticed was that I was the only Latina on that side of the building. So that was kind of an interesting thing, especially because in Salem, it's actually a very diverse community. People hear a lot about Portland, where it's supposedly the whitest big city in the country, but Salem is a majority Latino community. So going to Willamette was a total culture shock. Going and working for the senator was a total culture shock for me. But it was also a real awakening. That was the same year they took away the driver's licenses from our community. And I just remember that that same year, there was one of the biggest rallies I had ever seen. Still to this day, one of the largest May Day rallies. And I just remember being like, wow, what am I doing in here? I should be out there. And I mean, pretty much not much shortly after that, I went and became an organizer for CAUSA, Oregon's Immigrant Rights Organization. And that's where I really got very entrenched into the work of the Movimiento here in Oregon. And, you know, like they say, the rest is history.
Well, congratulations. So you became the executive director of PCUN in late 2018, is that right?
Yeah, it's been 2 and some change, 2 years and some change now. But I guess in the interim from CAUSA, there was a lot of different organizing campaigns that I was involved in. And I worked at CAUSA for about 5 or 6 years and really got my chops in the driver's license campaign, tuition equity. Also went and got arrested with Ramon on the national immigration reform fights back in 2013. And shortly after I left CAUSA, I actually joined the C4 board of PCUN and started to be very, very in the weeds around some of the political moves that PCUN was making in terms of the electoral side of the landscape. And so while I was doing that, I was also working for several other ballot measure campaigns. I kind of had to leave the movement to really kind of understand what I wanted to do. So I worked for Our Oregon for a little while as well, on the Measure 97 campaign, a big corporate tax measure we were trying to win in Oregon. It didn't win, but it was the groundwork to this really important change in Oregon that happened last year through the Student Success Act. And then after that, I went off to Family Forward Oregon to kind of lay the foundation for the Paid Family Medical Leave campaign as the organizing director and doing other national campaigns. In the interim, I get a call from Jaime Arredondo, who was the secretary treasurer at the time, and he's like, "Hey, let's meet up for coffee." And I'm just like, "Okay, yeah." I didn't really have any expectations for this meeting. I thought it was a catch-up meeting. He's like, "Hey, so Ramon's trying to retire pretty soon, and how would you like to come run PCUN?" And I was just like, "Whoa, wait, what?" And it's kind of funny because at this time I had literally called Ramon maybe a few months before that had happened, and I was like, "Hey man, I'm looking for a job, like, you know, what do you got at PCUN?" And he's like, "I might have something for you, like, I'll let you know." I'd never had to hear back from him, and so I was just like, okay, whatever. I was already kind of in this other campaign.
And for our viewers, you're referring to Ramon Ramirez, who was the president of PCUN for a number of years. He's been on our Farmworker Justice Board of Directors, and you're replacing him on our board, which we appreciate. But just so people know who Ramon is.
Ramon is the longest, he's the longest sitting president of PCUN, and he's an elder in the movement, and he's been my mentor for like over a decade. So basically, you know, when I asked him this, I was not expecting that, right? And so when the proposal was put out there, I was like, yes, this is what I've been wanting to do. And what Jaime said to me will always stick with me. Jaime Arredondo also was the secretary treasurer of PCUN. Now he's actually the chair of the PCUN board, which we have. Someday I'll tell you all about our structure. We're like 4 organizations in one. So we'll get into those mechanics some other time. But he was like, "It's time to come home," and I took that very seriously. I took that comment really, really seriously, because to me, this place is home.
That's great. So speaking of home, tell us a little bit about the work that farm workers do in Oregon. What kind of farm work is there? We often hear about berries, and you mentioned Christmas trees, but kind of give us the lay of the land.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so biased too. I call it the most vibrant agricultural state, but I don't know if what my California and my Washington friends would say, but yeah, I mean, we have a really, I mean, our industry is really beautiful and wide and known, I think, worldwide too. You heard a little bit about our Christmas tree industry. In terms of farming, it's not just food here, and nurseries are huge in Oregon. Actually, a big part of our membership, a huge part of our base is working in the nursery industry right now, involving trees and shrubs, grass seeds, all kinds of different things. And then, of course, Marion County, people know it. Some people used to call Woodburn the blueberry capital of the world. Obviously, Marion berries, hops, grapes, especially now more and more you might be hearing that Yamhill County is giving Sonoma County a run for its money. So we got our wine industry here. Wine country has been really growing. Pears, especially Hood River, famous for its pears. Cattle, hay. Hemp is also becoming a pretty, I mean, I'm sure it's growing in some of the places that you're also hearing about, but hemp is huge here. Wheat, potatoes, hazelnuts, cherries. Those are all the things you think about when you think about Oregon.
Yeah.
And where a lot of our base in our communities is working in, whether seasonally or throughout different jobs throughout the year.
Yeah. And are some of the workers who do farm work in Oregon are migrating from somewhere else? And if so, where do they come from?
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of just migration, and you know what, I got to give a shout out first to Hermiston, because we got Hermiston watermelons. I don't want anybody to get upset at me, so shout out to Hermiston. Love the watermelons. So yeah, so just in terms of where our communities mainly from, I mean, I think that mainly there's about, I mean, the numbers are always just funny to talk about, because I know that there's just always an undercount, or there's not really like the best numbers out there, but there's about 87,000 farm workers in Oregon, and we actually have a pretty solid domestic, like our workers coming from domestically, and also we have a good combination of H-2A workers as well. But I mean, the backbone of Oregon's workforce here is immigrants. About 40% of our community, our farm worker community, speaks indigenous languages of Latin America, top spoken Zapoteco, Triqui, Mixteco Bajo, Mam, and the numbers have, also say that a big chunk of our community lacks authorization, and that's anywhere between 50 to 70%. But I mean, it's the dominant community is folks that come from Mexico, is folks that come from now Guatemala, and a big chunk of the workforce now, at least half, is women as well. We're also showing up and holding our own in the workforce, and have been really and it's been showing too a lot in the organizing work. I think that as we've been seeing mujeres stepping up in their power, the issues are starting to look a little different too. We're talking about issues like childcare. We're talking about issues like paid family leave, and all of these things have a deep connection to the fact that I think you're seeing more women also taking leadership in different roles.
Yeah, thanks. So in speaking with groups all over the country, we've been hearing that a lot of employers in agriculture are still not following the CDC recommendations around physical distancing and providing adequate hand washing facilities and sanitation, and workers are still being transported in groups, in vans or buses, that they're often living in crowded housing. Most farm workers don't have health insurance, so they're concerned about whether they can get health care if they need it. So I wanted you to tell the audience, what you're seeing and hearing on the ground about the impact of the pandemic in Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, as you may have heard, at least we've seen some of this, and we've gotten a little national news over this, but Marion County has been hit pretty hard by the COVID-19 crisis. We've seen that about 30% of the cases right now are Latino community, and despite being only 13% of the state's population. And we're seeing COVID cases go down in some places across the state, but yet we just had another little surge just north of Woodburn in one of the little towns up called Jervis. So for us, I mean, this is a clear example of problems that are and gaps that are in our communities, in our society, that are getting magnified in a really big way. And I get very upset when I have elected officials and county government saying to me, like, what's going on with these Latinos? Why is this happening, right? And I'm just like, well, one, I don't like that narrative, one, but two, we're essential workers. We got to go out there. We don't have a real choice to stay home, whether it's a financial reason or whether it's because we are literally the ones keeping America fed. This is a very clear reason about why we're seeing our communities getting hit hard on this pandemic. And some of the things that I've been hearing in terms of testimonies from community is, well, first of all, that information is not getting disseminated to people, especially people that are in some of Oregon's most remote areas, most remote agricultural districts. It's been hard to really get people the information that they need and the supports that they need. Another thing that we've been hearing is that people don't have paid sick leave. So if somebody is getting sick on a work site, they don't really feel comfortable saying, hey, well, I need to take 14 days off and quarantine myself. That's not really an option for a lot of people. One, because they are going to fear losing those wages and they have mouths to feed. And two, they do fear that they're not going to be able to come back. In fact, we did hear of a farm worker that had to take some time off because they were sick, wasn't COVID, and the employer just told them not to come back. And so these are things that are happening. And in terms of the magnification of an issue that was already there, that people don't actually feel like they can negotiate their rights in the workplace directly with an employer, it really complicates things. Another thing that I've been hearing from some of our farm workers is that they have been trying to go get tested and they were turned away when they felt sick. And the reason that they were given is because they weren't symptomatic enough, or maybe the explanation wasn't as clear, but that has an impact. And there were several folks that had seen that they got very sick afterwards and that it was COVID-19. Also, we've been hearing that folks are losing work days and therefore they're not getting paid because a lot of our folks actually, going back to the numbers around lacking authorization in our undocumented worker population, they do not qualify for UI. They're not going to be getting a stimulus, and that is a big problem where some of our folks are literally just scraping by trying to make their next month's rent.
Right.
I think another. Oh, go ahead. Were you going to ask a question?
Well, I was going to say that the next question is about what PCUN is doing to help farm workers, and I was just going to mention that at the federal level, with PCUN and many other organizations, we've been advocating to reach farm workers with the programs that have been established, for other groups, but are often not reaching farm workers, and to make a special effort to, for programs and services and funding for these essential workers in the field. So, example is hazard pay. The farm workers' wages are among the lowest in the nation. They can't really absorb all these costs of dealing with the pandemic, of going to work, dealing with the fact that their kids are home because there's no childcare, that the schools are closed. They can't just absorb costs like that. They need to go to work. Many of them are undocumented, so they're not eligible, as you said, for unemployment insurance, but they should be. We're calling them essential workers, and some employers are saying, look, we've lost our business because we sell to restaurants and the restaurants are closed. While other employers are saying we need more workers, but there's not a way to get those workers who are unemployed to those other employers. Same thing with a range of issues, including testing, allocating the resources to get to the rural areas where farm workers are. So Farmworker Justice and a lot of other organizations are advocating for a lot of policy changes, and there's probably going to be another economic stimulus bill in Congress, and so we're trying to include as much as possible in that. But let's return to what PCUN is doing with and for farm workers on the ground in Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a lot. I think on the one hand, we were successful at securing a $10 million state investment for the Oregon Worker Relief Fund. It's specifically a fund that would allocate $1,600 per worker as an alternative stimulus for workers that are being affected by COVID-19, undocumented workers specifically. And then we're also really pressuring OSHA in Oregon. We've been fighting for temporary rules around field sanitation, labor, housing, and transportation. We actually were successful this past week at getting some temporary rules. It's a good first step. We need more. We need a more comprehensive plan, and we need more around the housing piece. We've been doing daily updates, resource sharing on the radio station on COVID-19, inviting all kinds of different sectors to talk about what the resources available to folks are, because we actually really need people to be able to hear it, not just this massive influx of information in our inboxes. As well as working on the national work, of course, we really would like to see hazard pay for our workers. We want to see some kind of essential worker bill of rights, if possible, and continuing to work with national delegates.
Thanks. Well, let me tell our viewers that before we start to wrap up, that there is a lot of information about these advocacy efforts and the specific requests that are being made to the administration and to Congress. We're also working with groups like PCUN in Oregon around these state-based efforts, because in the absence of any meaningful leadership by the Trump administration, in fact, due to the harmful policies of the Trump administration, many groups around the country are trying to get the states to take action. So Farmworker Justice joined in the comments that were submitted to the governor in Oregon to get this modest but helpful temporary safety standards, but still a lot more needs to be done at the federal level and at the state level. Again, before we finish up, let me tell our viewers that our next guest in our next interview is going to be a member of Congress, Representative Raul Ruiz. He's a medical doctor. He's from the Coachella Valley in California. He serves farm workers. He's the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Health Care Task Force. And we've worked with him on trying to improve access to healthcare in rural areas for farm workers and other rural residents as well. The following day, we're going to have Valdemar Velasquez. Valdemar Velasquez is the president of the Farm Labor Organizing Committee, FLOC, which is an AFL-CIO affiliate. It's based in both Ohio and North Carolina. Valdemar won one of those MacArthur Fellowship Genius Grants years ago for his creative work reforming the food supply chain. And we'll have another guest after that. So let me ask you, as we wrap up, Reyna Lopez, from the head of PCUN, because farm workers have been designated by the federal government and the state governments as essential workers, and because they've designated the food and agriculture sector that these farm workers work in as critical infrastructure sectors, looking down the road in the longer run, do you think we have an opportunity to raise awareness about the problems that farm workers face and have a better chance at winning the solutions to address those problems on behalf of farm workers?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think that we have an opportunity to continue to push. I don't think that it can happen just by, you know, doing the lip service and just calling us essential. It's going to take a lot more than that. And I think that calling us essential just reaffirms what we've already always known, and that they are, but they can't be spectators in this sport, right? That we are essential, and that we need to make sure that we move forward in the future by providing a pathway to legalization. I mean, I feel like some of these things that are so much more complicated right now could actually be a little less complicated with that piece of it. Many people I think that they would stay in agriculture in good faith if there was an attempt to pass a legalization. And I mean, right now, I think that I'm trying to take the little wins as they come. I think that it's really difficult to look at the big old system and not get bogged down by the numbers, by the issues, by all the things that are happening. And at the same time, I'm really hopeful by just the people that are motivating this organization to do this work, and the community that keeps me pretty hopeful, even in times when I almost kind of feel like, oh, a little bit destabilized. And I think that we can do it. I'm going to stay strong to the CSIP weather spirit, and I think that we can get through this. And I think I'm already seeing a lot of hopeful signs. And also, we can't just stop at the word essential workers. There's so much more work to do, and we can't allow that to just be where people stop.
Well, thank you. Well said. And we look forward to continuing to work with you to make all this happen. So thank you, Reyna Lopez, Executive Director of PCUN, Oregon's Farm Worker Union, and to our viewers. We hope that you'll support the valuable work of Farm Worker Justice. You can donate at our website, www.farmworkerjustice.org. We don't charge Reyna Lopez any money for the support we give to her and to PCUN and to farm workers. They're low-wage workers. They can't afford to pay for our services. We depend on public support, so we hope you'll make a donation. This is being recorded on a special Giving Tuesday focused on the pandemic and the need to address the problems that farm workers and others are experiencing as essential workers during the pandemic. So thank you again, Reyna. See you next time.